Hi, everyone. Welcome to Authentic Expressions. My name is Miga Klim. Today's session is Rise Above Shame, Nurturing Resilient Self Worth. Look forward to getting your questions. And today's program is sponsored by Laurel Ridge Treatment Center. So, Laurel Ridge is a behavioral health program that offers compassionate care for every stage of life. It provides personalized treatment for all populations. They're interested, their interest is to help you into your journey to wellness. There are services for children, adolescents, adults, military dependents, active duty service members, veterans, and first responders. They offer inpatient services, outpatient services, substance abuse treatment, residential treatment. Call 210-491-3591. Laurel Ridge is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their mission is to save lives, heal families, and create hope. All right, welcome. I see some familiar faces. And again, our topic is rising above shame, nurturing resilient self worth. So let's have your questions. I see a lot of familiar names, faces. Zach, Marnalitz, Dora, Cheryl, Christine, Leah, Santos, Victoria. Nice. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the lovely greetings. And I see Santos already has a question. Thank you for jumping in. Hi, Nate. So, Santos' question is early childhood was verbal, emotional, physical abuse. It was abuse that was it, the abuse has profoundly shaped their character and personality. Yes. So, how do they rise above shame? Sorry. You said you cut off your question. Yes. Go ahead and type in the rest. Yes. When someone has been abused, how do you help them rise above shame when there's a chronic long-term history? So, what are some thoughts? So, to help a person deal with some of these, it is important for them to unravel. It's important them to look at some of the impact of this abuse, these toxic words that have been ingrained in them. So it's important to talk about some of the messages that has been pumped into them and beaten into their emotional space. So help them talk about it, unravel it, put it on paper so that they can, write it out, tear it up, burn it in a ritualistic way to help heal. So in counseling, it is more about helping the person heal and to help them unravel their deep-seated messages that have been consuming them. All right, Christine says, I've done things that I regret in the past. What are some helpful ways to have inner peace with yourself and with others? All right, that's a great question, Christine. Yes, we all have done things that have been painful, hurtful, regretful, that have been destructive. So it's important to look at the emotions that drove us to do certain things. So when we do things, it's usually driven by emotion, by impulse, by lack of insight, by wanting immediate results to ease our pain. So helping to understand some of the motives, some of the reasons that drive you to act a certain way may help you be more forgiving. Usually, if you just look at the act, then it's more like, oh, I should have done that. We all know that. A smoker knows that they shouldn't smoke. But then if you tie it with certain emotions, you made impulsive decision, let's say. So you did it for a reason. Maybe your mother did it, your father did it. So the family was very impulsive. They did it because it's also tied into anxiety. So they were anxious, so they made quick decisions to ease their pain. So if you can connect different variables, that will help you understand what drove you to behave that way. And that would help you be more accepting that impulse driven by anxiety causes you to act in hurtful ways, hurting yourself, hurting others. So if you connect some variables, that will be able to get you to understand the deep-seatedness of some of our unhealthy behaviors. Okay, Santos goes, all right. How can a child who was raised in an extremely abusive family environment rise above shame, move on with their life when all they have experienced throughout their childhood, teenage years is abuse? Yes. So how can you help a person rise above shame and move forward? And like I said, for us to move forward, it's important to go backwards, to unravel, to talk about, to purge some of these things that have been buried so deeply into the depths of their soul. Many times you just ask a person to move on. It's not that easy. But when they unravel, they talk about it a bit at a time, and they look at, this abuse was tied into, your shame, your low self-esteem, your low self-worth. And then because you also saw your mother or father being ingrained with all those shameful messages and all those generational shame, then it's clear that it's been passed on from generation to generation. So do a historical timeline and see some of the shame that has been lived from generations to generations, and look at the messages that's tied into some of the shame that you experience, some of the messages that may be destructive, damaging, toxic. So be able to identify those, be able to talk about it. Don't just want to move on. To forgive and to move on means that you have to go backward to talk about it, to purge the deep-seated emotions, to express them, to put it out there so that you have space for new energy that is more about courage, that's more about healing, that's more about forgiveness. So to clean it out is important. All right, what other questions do you have? All right, so I see Christine. Yes, thank you so much for asking that question. Others, I would love to hear your question. So I see Dora, I see Menerlitz, Cheryl, Leah. Yes, feel free to jump in with your question. I see Zach. All right. I see Felicia. That's nice. Great. I see EK. Yeah, pose your questions. I would love to hear your questions. So just to get more prompts to your question is, so today's topic is rising above shame, nurturing resilient self-worth. So what questions might you have that will help you talk about moving forward? While you're typing your questions, I'm going to read you a quote by Becca Lee. She says, "The surest way to lose your self-worth is by trying to find it through the eyes of others." The surest way to lose your self-worth is trying to find it through the eyes of others. So it's important that you find it through your own eyes. All right, Nate, I love it that you have two questions or two different questions. Nate goes, when dealing with alcoholics and addicts, shame plays a large role in not only their active addiction, but especially when they're in recovery. What are some effective counseling strategies to help clients separate their identity from their shame and begin to rebuild self-worth? That is an awesome, awesome question. Yeah, in recovery, because shame sits in the person's deep, dark soul, is because when they were drinking or when they were in childhood, there is a lot of guilt, shame associated with their behavior. It could be that whenever they misbehaved, they were shamed. Whenever they did a certain things, guilt showed up. Whenever certain behavior showed up, anxiety and the negative self-talk showed up. So after it's been wrapped around all these damaging thoughts and talk has been wrapping around that soul, then even in recovery, it doesn't just peel off automatically. So it doesn't just go from dark to light, that they can suddenly have, healthier self-talk. So it's important in their healing to introduce other perceptions, other values, other perspective of themselves, not just wrap it in shame, guilt, anxiety. So have when they talk about some of their unhealthy, destructive behavior, hopefully another layer of shame peels up, another layer of peels up. When they talk about the people they've hurt, the abuse that has gone on to them, by them, from other people into their own lives. The more you help them unravel, do their life story, peel off layers, then it will make room for other healthier emotions. Doing their life story, writing their script based on the different stages of their lives is very helpful. And you can break it down by periods of a 5-year period intervals from 15 to 25, 20 to 25. What were some of the major challenges that were associated with their parents drinking, their parents addiction, their own drinking? So look at all those and see how it has impacted them. The more they're able to cleanse it, they're able to talk about it, not from a victim perspective, but from a unraveling, decompressing perspective, and look at the emotions that was tied into their behavior. And as they unravel it, what new emotions show up? Hopefully, that some of the new emotions might include what might be some of the emotions that they might be able to see things clearly. They may be able to feel a sense of relief, some forgiveness, some healing of relationships, some some depth of understanding of how the generational toxic behavior is weave into their own generational toxic behavior. So to have a historical decompressing to talk about it and to be able to clearly identify the emotions that go with the behavior, so then they can connect behavior with emotions, and then now as they unravel, what new emotions show up. Okay, Leah goes, how do I deal with shame that is projected onto me? That's a great question. Yes. How do I deal with shame that's projected on me? So that's good understanding. But what do you deal with? What do you do with that understanding? Do you just absorb it like a sponge, or are you able to give it back to the person? Just because it's put in your space, it doesn't mean that you have to take it, absorb it, and buy into it. If you do, because you were a child and critical thinking was not stronger, but now that you are adult and you have stronger critical thinking, you're able to separate out parts. Then look at, whatever that's projected onto you. Is it necessary for you to take on, absorb it? Or are you able to turn it loose and put it back on the person that belongs to the person who said it? Many times when people say things to us, it's usually about their pain, their emotions. So look at it from a different lens rather than a lens that is absorbent. Look at it from a lens of critical thinking that this belongs to whoever that put those words into your space. So learn to identify it, learn to separate it out, learn to think, okay, this has been said to me all these years. And in the past, I have taken it and kind of smear it upon myself. Now, as a person who is in adulthood, how do I want to deal with those things that is projected, poured into me? So learn to farm it back to the person, learn to step away, learn to end conversations that are not healthy, that's not in your best interest. And in earlier sections, in earlier live stream, I talk about the power of using your legs to walk away. When you are in situations that's not healthy, You can learn to end conversations like this is not a good time to talk. Sounds like, you're very heated. Sounds like I need a break from this as well. So take responsibility. Don't just stand there and absorb all things that are poured out and spewed out. So learn to walk away. All right, Brittany, welcome. How can someone work through their shame when the main person who triggers this shame lives with them? Yes, that's a very sticky situation. So I'm assuming that they're all adults in this situation. So how can you work through this shame? So in the first thing that comes to my mind is when you're living with somebody who is destructive, damaging, and toxic, it's important to set boundaries and limit your time with that person as much as you can. So the first thing that comes to my mind is respect. How do you show respect to yourself? So take that person out. In any situations, how do you show respect to yourself? How do you protect yourself? How do you value yourself, your space, and your emotional space and your physical space? So if you think at it from that angle, that in respecting yourself, I will do this. In respecting myself, I will take care of this. In respecting myself, I will. So identify the things that you will do for you, and then look at what you will need to do to protect your space so that you bubble yourself in healthy ways, not in isolated ways or in ways that's going to be destructive to you. So if there's possibility, learn to limit your time, learn to separate it, learn to do things that will get you out of the house, learn to find different space if it's at all possible, so that you're not constantly peppered by these um, unhealthy chatter, unhealthy conversations. So learn to walk away when things become destructive. So you have to use respect of self first and talk about how you can do things that's always in your best interest. Okay, Zach has a question. What's the best way to communicate shame instead of getting defensive and creating conflict as a result? Yes, that's a great question. So how do you best way to communicate shame instead of getting defensive and creating conflict? That's a yes. So what usually gets you hooked up into getting defensive, getting reactive, what draws you in and baits you into these heated conversations. So I would encourage you to think about that. What are the baits, and also what are your fantasies? Your fantasy is, what do you want to see happen in this conversation? You have a fantasy that you'll be heard, you'll be listened to, you'll be understood. That's why you get baited in, and then you do the tangle. You get into a tangle with them. So you have to look at yourself and take responsibility. When you get defensive, is what emotions shows up and causes you to get engaged in that conversation. And how have you used this unhealthy emotion that gets you into the boxing match? So step back and look at yourself, take accountability, take responsibility, and see how you can step back, identify emotions that trigger you, identify patterns of how your parents were triggered, your mother was triggered, or your father was triggered, or you know somebody in your life was triggered, and how they got caught up, seduced, sucked into those heated, shameful situations. So as an adult, you do have choices, and you do have the ability to step back. So I would exercise those and execute those clearly and proactively, Because if you see a slippery slope, a slimy, slippery slope, learn to walk away. When you see a landmine, don't just step into it and hope that you don't get blasted, because that's a setup. So think about your own fantasy that you got into it because you were hoping for something to happen. Maybe you were hoping to be heard. All right, Felicia goes, I had a client today struggling with shame of being single in her 80s. No, in her 30s. How can I offer support? She mentioned that she's been alone her entire life. No, in her 80s? In her 30s. Okay. So how can I support her? How has she's been alone her entire life? So sounds like there's a message surrounding the concept of being alone. Sounds like he or she is having negative associations that at 30 I'm still single. At 30 I'm alone. So where did they weave in the concept that at 30 that life is over, that that being single is a negative thing? I guess many people would love to be in her shoes. So I would identify the messages she says to herself. Being 30 is what? That means I'm undesirable. I'm a reject. So I would identify those negative messages he or she says to herself. And then I would look at, the roots of those, and I would help her understand the emotions that is tied into those messages, and how long has she been beating herself up with these negative emotions. So it's important to help her see the roots of this, the script that goes with it, the emotions that go with the script, and the buy-in that she has embellished these negative thoughts. And then she feels defeated, she feels down, she feels like a reject, she feels like a undesirable person. So I would unravel those scripts and help her understand, if is that her script or somebody else that she just blindly assumed. Okay, Felicia says, should one build self-compassion if they are engulfed with shame when when they aren't where they believe they should be in life? All right, yes. Yes, okay, I like that. Introducing self-compassion is very healthy. But I would also introduce critical thinking and see help challenge the view of the importance of just embracing shame, that they're living life through one single lens. It's like eating baked potato all day long for 20 years. That's unhealthy. So it's important to look at their rigid stance, because many times if they just go to shame as their default behavior, they associate shame with everything, then there's a lot of rigidity. There's a lot of one-track thinking. So I would also address where they learn to be so rigid, the one-track thinking. Who else in his or her life uses the one-track thinking to cope? And I would help her identify a variety of different emotions. So besides shame, what else can you introduce? It could be negative things. It could be a variety of different emotions. So you open up and expand their repertoire of emotions so that they can learn to tap into those. There are probably a lot of other emotions. It's just hidden and unspoken. So I would help them open up other boxes that goes with different emotions, and look at associations. When there is hurt, maybe they blame themselves, and then they go, it's my fault. I shouldn't have done this. I know I'm stupid. And the self-talk goes down, and then boom, they're in the shame cycle. So help them understand some of the unhealthy self-talk that always leads them down that shameful path. Okay, Garland goes, welcome. I believe holding on the values of others above your own leads to shame. Yes, very good point. Yes, holding on and not use critical thinking, but also you tie in rigidity and always using shame is a recipe for, stuckness. So Dora goes, when a client is so ashamed of something they did, they refuse to talk about it. What are some strengths, strategies to help them finally allow themselves to talk about it? I would use a lot of sentence stems to help them identify some of their struggles so they refuse to talk about it. The sentence stem would be talking about it would mean that maybe I would be, disloyal. Talking about it would also mean that I, break the silence. Talking about it would also mean that I violate trust. Because don't talk about the behavior first, but talk about the emotions surrounding being open. So it's important to look at different emotions and express those, the negative of talking about it, and then the importance of being vulnerable and being open. So do a lot of steps about talking about it could break trust, could mean that I'm betraying the family secret, the family mantra. So look at all the faulty logics that go with opening up. And so don't talk about the behavior first, but go to the logic and help them identify some of their faulty logic. Okay. Linda goes, how does one embrace shame? What does that look like? All right. So let me see if I can understand it. Embrace shame. What does that look like? Embrace shame in a healthy way or embrace shame and let it go. So I'm going to make some assumptions. So embrace shame and what does that look like? So you want to let it go. It's important to unravel it, untangle it, decompress, let let go of some of the energy, the intense energy that is surrounding shameful acts, shameful thoughts, shame that does not belong to you. So many times we just put it in one big bucket, in this dark, deep bucket, very gooey. So it's important to pull things out and talk about it and talk about what is associated with it, what are the emotions. So the more you help them identify different emotions, leaning into it rather than ignoring it or hiding it, because the more you lean into it to understand it, to look at all the tangled emotions surrounding it, that will help them heal and make room for other emotions. All right, one last question. Crystal, how do you expose faulty logic with a client? That's a great question. So to be able to talk about the root of their logic and what is the different self-talk that goes with the logic, like the need to perform, the need to be perfect, the need to please others. That's all faulty logic. So I would understand that, understand the roots of it. Where did it come from? Whom did they see play those faulty logic into life? And to look at how they can use different logic to challenge it and to look at what they can do to untangle from those logic and to help them implement healthier new logic. Because if they are in adult age, I would, even in young children, I would go, what is a different way of looking at this? You have looked at it from this angle. So now look at it from this angle. How might you want to phrase it so that it's different? So just because you heard it, it doesn't mean it's always right. Parents do make mistakes, and then you as children do get to rephrase things and rewrite your logic. Thank you for such awesome questions. So next week, the topic is who's in your circle? Help teens identify healthy versus toxic friendships. So thank you for these awesome questions. Again, today's video is sponsored by Laurel Ridge. So Laurel Ridge is a behavioral health program that offers compassionate care for every stage of life. So it provides services for children, adolescents, adult military dependents, active duty service members, veterans, and first responders. They're open 24 hours, 7 days a week. Their mission is to save lives, heal families, and create hope. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope to see you again next week. Come ready with your questions. Have a good evening.